I feel for that.
I have one thing to do before we start recording. And I also think that are we on?
I can hear you.
Like to welcome everyone to the July 16th, 2025 Cottonwood Heights Planning Commission meeting. This is the work session. And before we dive into the business session agenda and business at hand, I'd like to introduce Maverick or have Maverick be introduced. And maybe we all as commissioners could introduce ourselves too, so that Maverick knows who we are if we don't. And do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. So I'm Maverick. I'm a planner too, and I started a city job with like an intern with the city manager, and he like moved to different position. It was like a system planner, planner one, and now to planner two. Help with all the permit process and sometimes help prepare some planning commission things, but not represented, but with some planning commission staff.
Maverick regularly presents at our administrative hearings that Mike Johnson used to oversee. And he does a lot of work behind the scenes that you guys don't see. So it's great that he's here. And
Thrilled to have him here.
yeah, maybe introductions would be great.
Sure. I'll start, but before I start, I'm going to ask those people who are back here, please. We're having a meeting, so I appreciate it if you hold down the conversation. Lucy Anderson.
Rusty Lugo, second meeting, so we'll go easy on each other.
Sean Steinman.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
Gary Barnes, I'm relatively new. This is my 5th meeting.
Nice to meet you.
Dan Mills, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Another Dan, Polson.
A lot of similar names.
Mike Shelton.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And online, I think we have Mike Smith.
Yes, I'm Mike Smith. Disregard the name that pops up there. That's another story. But good to meet you. Good to be with you.
Oh yeah, you're talking, but we can't hear you, but we can see the closed captioning coming.
Yeah.
So
Be with you.
we'll try and
Why can't
get
you?
that sorted.
Okay, it says I am unmuted, so
Yeah, I think the issue's on our end. I can see your closed captioning coming in, so it's picking up your audio, but your voice is not being projected into the room. So we'll look into that.
all right.
Sorry, Mike.
Thank you, Ian.
All right. And then Jared, you want to?
I'm Jared Gerber. I'm the city manager. I've been here a couple times, but just to give you an update on to where we're at, we do have a new director starting on Monday. His name is Jim Spong. He is most recently from Taylorsville City. Excited to have him on board. I just went to lunch with him today and talking about filling Ian's position. So, so he'll start Monday, but he won't be at the August meeting because he had a pre-planned vacation. So the August meeting, I'll be here with Maverick.
Yep. I'll be here for that.
Great. Well, love it. Okay. So diving in, taking a look at what's going to take place in the business session, we have a couple of business items. One is a public hearing and potential recommendation to City Council on a general plan amendment and zoning map amendment, and also a second item, public hearing and potential action on amending the Giverny?
I say Giverny, but
Giverny?
Giverny.
Regarding accessory structure setbacks.
And sorry to interrupt you, but I might suggest switching the order of those items. We
Okay.
received quite a few comments on the zoning map amendment, and to benefit our applicant for the other item, it may be good to run that one first. since
Sure,
it seems
sounds
like we
great.
may have less public input.
Perfect. That sounds great. Do you want to go ahead and do it that way here
Yeah,
too?
yeah, I'd be happy to.
Okay, great. Go ahead and dive in.
Okay, let me just pull up my files and share my screen. Okay, it's coming up there. I'm just gonna zoom out so that it doesn't clip anything off. Okay, here we go. Okay, Acrobat, Adobe Acrobat just updated, so the controls are shifted a little bit, so if I run into technical difficulties, I apologize, but we should be able to get through this pretty smoothly. So, okay, we're switching the order of the applications that are on your agenda. So the first one we'll go through is actually the Giverny PUD amendment, organized under file number CUP 25011, because this is technically a conditional use permit, I believe. Just a summary slide on this application. This encompasses the entirety of the Giverny PUD community, which is outlined in blue on that map there. As always, the TV behind me is much easier to see than the projector, but you can look at both for the information. This is a conditional use amendment or conditional use application to amend the Giverny PUD subdivision as it pertains to accessory building standards. Our applicant is Brent Johnson on behalf of the HOA. I believe he's in the audience, and he can, speak to the application in the business session or clarify anything that I'm missing or getting wrong. So, just some background: when Giverny was applied for and approved back in around 2014, 2015, it included distinct setback standards for primary structures, but nothing as it pertains to accessory structures that I could find in the records for that application. This was long before my time with the city, and we had a completely different staff at this point. So I'm not super familiar with that application, but I researched it pretty extensively and could not find any accessory structure standards, but there were primary structure, especially setback standards, that were adopted as part of this planned unit development. And this was largely due to the smaller size of the properties and the fact that it was part of a PUD, which is different than other non-PUD R18 zoned subdivisions within our city. A lot of Giverny residents in the meantime have constructed accessory structures without fully understanding city code regarding accessory structures. So we don't require building permits on structures less than 200 square feet. A lot of these non-conforming structures that residents have built are less than 200 square feet, so they haven't gone through the building permit and zoning review process for those, which is totally fine, but accessory building standards still need to be met, even if a building permit isn't being applied for. So that's where a lot of the confusion has come, and because these small backyards and small lot sizes have resulted in some non-conforming structures that have been built. So the request I outlined in the staff report, and I'll kind of clarify this a little bit in the next slide, but based on the applicant's narrative, I understood that the requested deviations from city code were the following, and you can see this in your staff report as well. The city standards are listed on the left, and then the proposed modifications, as I understood it initially, were listed on the right side. So that's an increased minimum setback from side and rear property lines and no minimum distance setback from the primary structure. Our city code requires a 3-foot minimum setback from side and rear property lines for accessory buildings in the rear yard and a minimum 6-foot distance from the primary structure. I understood these requests to only affect open air gazebo and pergola type structures as defined in city code with our yard elements that we recently went through and adopted. However, the applicant provided additional clarification on their request that's not included in your staff report. This came through after I published the packet. And these clarifications are that sheds would be included in the list of affected structures along with pergolas and gazebos. That's what they're also requesting. And then affected structures could be located up to 3 feet close to property lines in rear yards if the roof height does not exceed 8 feet tall. I think that's in line with our current city code. But if it's taller than 8 feet, then they would require a minimum 5-foot setback.
And is this all within R18 specifically? Are we just copying and pasting R18 code?
For these proposal,
Yeah.
like this proposal, no, these standards that they're asking for in the PUD amendment would deviate from the R18.
But when you list the city standards here, are you listing the R18 city standards?
Yeah, the city standards listed in this table are the R18 city standards. What they're proposing deviates from that slightly. So as far as staff analysis goes, we found this amendment to be generally reasonable given that the reduced lot standards within the Giverny subdivision complicate accessory building locating within the lots in the community that other residents in Cottonwood Heights within this R18 zone do not face. Additionally, no new standards are being proposed that would bring these accessory structures closer to property lines. and impose more of a visual burden on their neighboring properties. So based on this analysis, we're supporting this item. And I'd also note that at the time of planning commission, this item was included in your staff report as well. We haven't been made aware by our building official who we sent this review to of any implications on the proposed rules in the amendment. And then I'd also just clarify that this proposed amendment would not usurp building code in any way. Building code would still be required for structures to be constructed.
Could you go back to the table for
Yep.
1 second? Okay, so the minimum, but then, so there then was something about a different setback from rear property line. Oh, minimum 5 foot, effect could be located up to 3 foot. Are those things?
So it meets city standards, except they're proposing if you go beyond 8 feet in height, that it needs to be 5 feet away, which our city zoning code doesn't say anything about that. That might be a building code rule. I'm not familiar with building code. I'm not a building official, but that might be why that clarification.
And
was-
that taller than 8 feet would not require going to an administrative hearing or?
No, it would just require that the building be set back 5 feet instead of 3. And if it's less than 200 square feet, they could, apply for, or they wouldn't need to apply for a building permit. They would just need to meet those rules. Is that clear? It's a little fuzzy.
And do we run into, I mean, I know this is a PUD, so there's different things that it has different kind of standards. And if someone who has a small yard outside of a PUD wants to build a structure and they hear, oh, Giverny was able to do it. I understand. I think it's just, we need to make sure we're clear that because this is a PUD,
Mhm.
they can request this.
Yes, yeah, our
Right, I
code
mean,
allows
that's why,
them a
right.
mechanism. to
I
do
mean, I
this.
think that's just an important, because we've had some situations in the past about how close accessory dwelling units and sheds
Sure.
and things are, so, okay.
But can I just clarify? It seems to me like the only thing that is less stringent than the R18 underlying zone
Mhm.
is the minimum distance from the primary structure. Other than that, this is all more restrictive than the R18 zone is on its space. Is that right?
That's my understanding. Yeah,
So they've asked for something that applies even greater standards than they would have had
as far as zoning code goes, yes,
in the zone, other than the one about the distance from the primary structure.
yes, yeah.
And,
Well, no, you're good. We'll have you clarify anything in the business session next. Yeah, no, that's great. I'll just kind of wrap up here. I don't have too much to go through after this, but again, we interpreted this request as a conditional use permit application, given that PUDs are a conditional use in the R18 zone, which is how Giverny got built in the first place. Planning Commission has the approval authority on PUD amendments according to the city code listed there. The staff report gets a little more technical with that authority. We can refer to that if you need to, but I didn't want to put a ton of text on the slide. So yeah, that's kind of the procedure and authority that we've interpreted that we run this application through. As far as noticing and public comment goes, we did notice the application under a different file number, PUD 25001. I updated the application number to request to reflect what I believe to be the correct file type for this, which is CUP. That's all just kind of technical and organizational stuff. If someone in the future does like a records request on PUD 25001, I've organized our internal files so that that file number will redirect to CUP 25011. So there shouldn't be confusion there. We received one public comment that was forwarded to you all before this meeting yesterday. I'm not sure if anyone is here to speak on the item today, but we'll let them have the chance. But it was just that one comment that we got via email.
Has fire reviewed this request from a setback standpoint?
I haven't gotten a review from our fire department. Our building official does have some overlap as far as like firewalls go, I believe.
Is that going to be required in this process to go through fire after we approve this or deny it?
We'll
We'll have them look at it, but the building code doesn't require the 6 foot separation. My guess is the 5 foot from the property lines is for if you get closer than 5 feet, you gotta have a 1 hour firewall.
It's my understanding.
And so that's probably what the 5 foot is for. The 6 foot separation is typical, but it's not specifically required by the residential or fire code.
So even with it being 0
Mhm.
setback from primary dwelling, should that be something that fire should be reviewing?
They probably should, we should send it to them to review.
Yeah, we can.
But typically, the 6 foot is that separation to say it's not part of the actual main structure. When you get less than 6 feet, a lot of building codes require, count that as one structure. Which I'm guessing is why the 5 foot is there from the property line then.
Yeah,
It kind of makes sense. It
Yeah,
kind of makes it then part of the main structure, and in these smaller lots, it's just kind of hard to.
I feel very comfortable having fire review that, just because if we are eliminating setbacks
Mhm.
from primary structure, let's just say it is a shed and there's a
Gasoline
lawnmower
is
in
going
there,
up.
gasoline is in there, I want to
Good point.
get the weigh-in of fire just to better understand.
Yeah, it's the same way. If any accessory structure is closer than 5 feet, they're supposed to have a 1 hour rated firewall too. To the property line.
Okay,
So the issue then becomes you're bringing that closer to the house, and that's kind of what we need to have them review is.
yeah, so I mean, a tough shed, I think, is a 2.5 minute rated firewall.
Yeah. I don't know.
But no, it's just Tinder, so I think that's something that would be interesting for us to look at.
okay.
I'd also wonder if, and I don't know if we need to answer this question tonight, but I always love it if there's some precedent or if these are numbers that are just being pulled out of a hat based on people just spitballing with an HOA board. So I will look forward to hearing from the applicant if there's any detail about how they came to these numbers, or that just seemed like a good general number. I always appreciate for the city that if there's some precedents for why we're saying this number versus that number, including the fire issue.
Sure. Yeah. I'll just kind of keep going here and
Sorry,
then-
real quick, Mike, without rebooting the whole system, we can't get the audio to play, so Alex is gonna watch and see if Mike makes any comments or raises his hand, and then
Okay,
we'll read his comments into the.
okay, yes.
Thank you.
Mike, we'll try and in the business session, we'll try and make sure we got you. Thank you. So I don't have too much else to add. We found that the application to be code compliant as far as zoning, and I actually just got an email from our building official on this item. He was just confirming that he didn't have any additional feedback. The application looks fine to him. That's not our fire official. But as far as building code goes, we find this to be code compliant as well. Our findings of fact are listed in the staff report. We recommend approval, and then I've just got model motions. But do you guys have any other questions on this item for me?
I'd just like to clarify one thing, although it's quite clear in here, but this applies only to open air structures, correct?
That was the original proposal. The applicant would also like it to include sheds.
Okay,
And that was discussed after that staff report was published.
okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
And you could include that in the like approval fairly easily. Or
is there a definition to a shed?
I actually don't know the answer to that.
I think we do somewhere.
Yeah.
We defined pergolas and gazebos recently. I don't know that we have to find a shed.
I think we did, because I think we said something about non-livable or something. I
It was
mean,
an
Yeah.
AU conversation.
Yeah,
Was there?
Okay.
I can try to pull that up if you guys have any other questions while I'm doing that. If not.
Curious, is this just from structures of this nature going forward, or does this kind of bring in the rest of them into compliance because of the way they've set their parameters?
Yeah, the hope is I think that this would bring several structures into compliance. The applicant who represents the HOA could more speak to the prevalence of that within their community, but then it would also apply to any buildings that are being constructed going forward.
Yeah.
So,
I'm just wondering how it was getting grandfathered.
yeah, it would essentially make those structures that are non-complying today to city code compliant with city code, bring them closer into alignment. I don't see a definition in our definitions chapter for sheds specifically.
Mentioned under accessory buildings, but just says tool or storage sheds as an accessory building.
It's like we don't get too specific on that, but if that's a concern, we can maybe discuss that in the business session.
So does shed in this context mean accessory building,
Yeah, it would.
or is accessory building too broad? If we use the accessory building definition.
I think it's probably too broad.
too
I think it's
broad.
encompassed within the accessory building definition.
Okay.
it could be a livable space and that can't.
What does the definition say though? Is it-
For accessory buildings, it looks like accessory building means any structure not designed for human occupancy, which may include detached garages with no habitable space, tool or storage sheds, gazebos, and swimming pools. Accessory dwelling units and businesses located in accessory buildings must comply with all requirements for buildings designed for human occupancy. So the applicant's not proposing an amendment that encompasses all of those things within that definition. Just sheds, gazebos, and pergolas, which are not even included in there.
Are swimming pools included in what the applicant's looking to?
No, specifically not. I asked the applicant about that and they wanted to make sure, no, it wasn't. That our existing swimming pool standards, which includes hot tubs, would be followed within the Javerni community as our city code lays out for the entire city.
Okay.
Any more questions? I can move on to the next item.
Let's dive into it.
Okay. Yeah, we'll in the business session, we'll have you speak to it. Thank you. Moving really quickly on to the zoning map amendment application. You're all familiar with this property, or you should probably be at this point. I didn't include a background slide here because it would probably get really wordy, but I'll try to kind of talk through it just to kind of refresh everyone's memory in the commission and in the audience. So this rezone is being applied for that former Wells Fargo property located on Bengal Boulevard near the intersection with 3500 East, just across from that Smith strip mall. You may recall as residents of Cottonwood Heights, this was a Wells Fargo for many, many years. In the early 2010s, or excuse me, 2020s, Wells Fargo shut down this location, but the main branch structure remains. An application was applied for earlier this year to develop live work townhomes essentially on the property. Live work was a conditional use in the neighborhood commercial zone, which is the zoning designation for this property. There were some concerns voiced by members of the commission and by members of the public that basically convinced you to continue this item and let the applicant respond to these concerns. The applicant later withdrew their application. Simultaneously, as I think Jared mentioned earlier, there was a moratorium placed on live work developments within the city because of concerns that our code didn't properly define or address live work developments in general. We workshopped a definition with you guys and that's since been adopted. In that meantime, an application, a conditional use permit application was applied for to operate a church out of this property that was also withdrawn. And now the applicant who proposed the initial live work development is proposing a rezone of this property from neighborhood commercial to residential multifamily, with the concept being that they would develop 6 townhomes on the property. I'll just kind of make sure everyone in the audience is aware, as well as our commissioners who I think are aware, that what's being asked for today is consideration on the rezoning request, not on any concrete development proposal. The applicant has provided you with some information in your narrative and in those renderings to give you some idea of what they would like to build on the property. But today you're considering the development standards within the RM zone that they would like you to rezone this property to, or that they would like city council to rezone this property to. So with that background out of the way, I'll kind of move forward in my presentation. The request is twofold, kind of similar to the one that you may have seen earlier this year on Fort Union Boulevard from the applicant Adam Nash. If you're familiar, Mike presented that application. As part of this application, we would need to change the land use designation and the zoning, similar to that Adam Nash property on Fort Union. So what's being applied for here today is a change of the land use designation from neighborhood commercial, which you see on this map here, to residential medium density. And then as far as zoning goes, which is what allows them to, it gives them parameters for development if they choose to develop on their property. They're proposing a change from neighborhood commercial, which is what exists now, as you're well aware of, to residential multifamily.
Ian, do you have details about what this was zoned before neighborhood commercial was zoned here?
I don't, as far as my research took me, I could only find record of it being zoned as neighborhood commercial.
That was a new zoning within 2017
Was it? Yeah,
approximately.
I don't know what it was zoned before. I don't have access to those historical zoning maps. I'm not sure. My assumption is that it was zoned the same as the development across the street, a commercial zone. But I don't exactly know what that designation was before neighborhood commercial. It's been that bank branch since, I think, before we've been incorporated.
Yeah.
As far as the zoning goes, I'm not sure, but no development has really occurred on the property since we adopted our current zoning regime back in 2005 and updated it over the years. So staff's analysis of this application is generally that we find the request to amend the land use map and the zoning map generally compatible with our long-range vision and goals for the area for 6 reasons. And 3 of them are on the slide, and then I'll go to the next slide, which shows a few more. Single-family dwellings attached are permitted uses in the RM zone. Other than home occupations, no commercial or office uses are permitted in the proposed zone without a conditional use permit. The designated land use of many nearby properties along Bingo Boulevard and the surrounding vicinity is also residential medium density, which is shown in that map that I just had on the screen. I can go back to that if you'd like. While no property in the vicinity is zoned RM, many properties are zoned R8, which is another multifamily zone. These properties contain a similar density of dwelling units to what the applicant is proposing as a concept here. Going back to the land use designation, you can see, I mean, it's really hard to see the differences in the colors here. This is just what our map shows when we pull up the land use map. But you can see that there's these darker orange properties nearby on Chadbourne Drive, some off Bingo Boulevard, some off 3500 East. So it's not uncommon for this general neighborhood. And then as far as the zoning designation goes, there is not an RM zoned property in the immediate vicinity. There's some further west along Bingo Boulevard, but there are multifamily residential zones on Bingo Boulevard and on 3500 East in the general vicinity.
So can they get the same density with the R28 multifamily?
I don't know. I didn't review the R28 multifamily zone as part of the application because they're asking for the RM, but that could be something that the applicant explores. Yeah. One of my findings, actually, I'll go back to my analysis, is that where did I have it? Yeah, well, no property is zoned RM, many properties are zoned R28, and it's a similar density to what's being proposed here. I kind of did some general calculations on 6 units being squeezed into this property, what the dwelling unit per acre measurement was. And I tried to estimate it in some of these other developments nearby. It seemed fairly similar, including to the duplexes on Chadbourne.
What are the setback requirements different between the residential multifamily and the R28 multifamily? Do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head. The RM standards are in your staff report. And we can pull up the R28 ends. Yeah, the R28 has setback standards. Looks like front yard would be 25 feet for any primary structure. Side yards is not complicated because it's duplexes, but 5 foot minimum.
15 combined.
Yeah, 15 combined. It's a little different for corner lots, and then for rear, we're looking at 20 feet. I don't know what those compare to the RM ones. I don't have them.
So RM is 30 feet for front, so it looks like R28.
For the front, it would be more restrictive. What are the sides, John, if I could ask you?
Sides 25 feet. Street side at least 10 feet on the interior side, 30 feet on the street side for corner lots.
Okay. And then the rear is
30.
okay, 30. So it looks like the RM zone is slightly more restrictive overall as far as the setbacks go. That could factor into your consideration.
Yeah.
I'll keep going on my analysis. Did you have a question, Commissioner Colson?
Well, an observation.
Yeah.
And that is in the RM zone. And in its purpose, it states that's to provide areas of the city for high density residential development. In the R28 zone, the purpose is to accommodate moderate residential density. If you look around, all the properties that are multifamily, if you will, most of them are duplexes, and there are R28. There isn't an RM zone and clear down until 2600 East. And it's in much bigger piece of property, so there's
Mhm.
green space and all that. With just a little bit less than half an acre here, the chances there'll be any green space will be open, and that the housing will fit the land
Yeah,
isn't big if you put really the high density that, the other thing that kind of was of interest to me is in the applicant's benefit to the community as a whole. This last sentence says that the development here is planned as low density. Yet what's being asked for here is high density. And
yeah.
I'm confused as to the intent. I think it would fit the neighborhood better to be looking at the R28 rather than the RM.
Yeah, that could be a recommendation you make to the applicant, and if you'd like to continue the item and see that happen, and you're at consensus about that, then that could be an option that the applicant explores. They can probably speak better to why specifically they're choosing to apply for a rezone to RM.
Okay.
I'd also say that there's quite a few standards in the RM zone, apart from just the purpose of the chapter, that might restrict development on the property, like the setbacks we just discussed.
Mhm.
So that might limit the density of development you could find on that property.
Well, that was actually my point,
Mhm.
is that the R28 zone surrounds that quite a bit. There are
Mhm.
other properties that have that zone, quite a few. And the RM is far removed, and it's much, much, much less used in Cottonwood Heights.
Mhm.
And so I'm wondering if that might not be a better zone to put on the property.
But I
I know that's not what's requested.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
The
too,
density.
the RM zone is a little more restrictive though. I mean, it requires greater setbacks and that kind of thing. So I mean, I think that's might make it a little more friendly, if you will, for the neighborhood.
But it,
Despite the language in the narrative, the reality is that there is probably only going to be allowed lesser density in the RM zone than in the R28.
I would also just.
The
add
language
that-
in the narrative aside from that.
I would just add on to that the open space requirement, since yard space was something that you brought up,
Mhm.
for the R28 zone is 10% of the total project. For the RM zone, it's 15%.
Mhm.
So even though the purpose is a little bit reverse of what we're seeing with the setbacks and the required open space, the RM zone, like Commissioner Anderson said, is a bit more restrictive on development. But they could explore a different zone, like maybe in the meeting at 6 PM, when the applicant speaks on the project, they could better answer the concerns you have about that. I'll just keep moving forward with the last few points I have on my analysis. Something to note is that the property that we're talking about today is the only parcel on the north side of Bangor Boulevard in the vicinity that's zoned and designated as neighborhood commercial. So it's adjacent to that neighborhood commercial larger Smith's parcel to the south, but it is kind of an island on that side of the street, if you will. There's far more, there's quite a few multifamily residential zones on that side of the street, R28, not RM, but it is kind of an island in its current status. As it's zoned now, the neighborhood commercial zone allows residential uses under the neighborhood mixed use category within allowed conditional uses for that zone. A development of that type, of the neighborhood mixed use type, although I'm not seeing a proposal here today, it would likely entail a more intensive land use for the property with a similar number of residential units and a commercial component, compared to what the applicant wishes to develop, which is just 6 townhomes at this point. Again, while detailed development plans are not part of this proposal, all of the RM zoning standards, including the ones that we discussed today, would still apply to any development that's applied for on this property, such as minimum lot sizes, lot width, setbacks, maximum heights, open space, lot coverage. That's all in the attached RM zone in your packets.
And one thing I want to, because there is a concern expressed in comments and is typically a concern in any kind of residential development, is the height. And the height would not change if something's built in neighborhood commercial or RM, putting aside the land slope and that kind of thing, but
Yeah.
right, it would still, the height of how tall a building could be is the same, correct?
The maximum height in an RM zone is 35 feet. Off the top of my head, I don't remember what it is in the NC zone. Do you remember? In the adjacent residential,
35 feet.
yeah, in the adjacent residential circle, it's 35 feet. The homes in that residential circle may not be built up to that 35-foot maximum, but the maximum is the same nonetheless.
What I think is most interesting about this development is it gives a better property. It gives a better opportunity because I think they were trying to fit previously a multifamily project on a neighborhood commercial zoning. So there were certain things that were just waste on that project before. This now gives them some more autonomy. And that's what I'm seeing here is it gives them that autonomy. It gives a better product for the residents there. It's a better experience for the residents. The commercial component, I think, is an important factor within neighborhood commercial, but they were trying to make a multifamily project on a neighborhood commercial zoning. And I think that looking at this, if they cannot go above, and if you can guarantee they can't go above 6 units in the density, I think this actually is a very thoughtful project and very thoughtful rezone from my analysis on this.
When I appreciate that, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I appreciate that there's a 50% maximum lot coverage. This is not a big lot, so, I mean, we've all been hopeful that there can be something that's helpful to the adjacent area, and, I mean, you know, you could put a Starbucks with a drive-through. In terms of number of cars coming and going and public safety, I mean, you know, you watch that one on Highland Drive, there are all sorts of things under neighborhood commercial that would be hazards, just absolute hazards. This on the scale feels like a significant upgrade. I mean, the number of cars coming and going, I'm pleased. I have that same hope that we're talking about 6 units, but I am comfortable that because of the setback issues that it's gonna provide some limits and some guardrails, whatever he puts in there. This is how high it can be, no higher than 35 feet, no closer than this, no deeper than this, whatever he wants to do.
If he were to develop in neighborhood commercial the way it stands right now, he could get roughly 30 units, if I remember correctly, plus commercial downstairs in that space. You know, these would be studio units, but by right, from what I remember, is he could get 30 units. He would just need to get the economics to work for a commercial space on the ground level. So 6 units versus the 30 units, what neighborhood commercial could provide there at the height. Now, I don't think the economics work on that because you have a giant commercial space down below. You have to, you know, do quite a bit to make that work. But I think from a impact standpoint, this makes a lot of sense.
And I look at it from a neighborhood perspective. Was brought up about safety, having the traffic of 6 townhomes versus the 30 studio apartments, commercial. Anyway, I can see some merit to it.
I have a question. By making this change, this is sort of the gateway or the entrance to this potential project. And if that's the case, I'm just curious, is this type of project consistent with the neighborhood?
That's
You mean the style of the building or?
Well, not necessarily the style, but the fact that it's multifamily.
The
There's
neighborhood has
family on the east
reflected
and the
the-
west of this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, all around.
I mean, there are duplexes to the east and then there's,
Could you pull up the zoning?
yeah.
And-
Let me see it.
Like directly west of is a circle,
Yeah,
and
The
that's
mustard
single
color.
family homes.
on the
But
east.
then there's townhomes and duplexes on Bengal Boulevard, not too far.
Yeah,
West.
I would say it's a pretty mixed neighborhood as far as like the character of it goes. I mean, for that specific circle, it's been a single family.
Yeah, well,
Circle.
duplexes and townhomes, a little different than this though, isn't it?
Well, first of all, duplexes and townhomes are two very different.
I understand.
And we're talking townhomes here,
Okay.
so.
Call them what you will.
Well, they're very,
The
I mean,
neighborhood
they're
is
very- I think
pretty
they're very
different than what this suggests. It seems like.
Well, I'm sorry, what you're saying, then what? Because what could be built there is 30 studio apartments
Under the current zoning,
under the current
Yeah.
zone.
with neighborhood mixed use as a, yeah.
But he tried 10 and that didn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
the-
the chances
yeah.
it
And
could get
even
30
nine,
in there
you
is
could
zero.
figure out a way with the
Yeah.
parking and the turnarounds and fire and snow.
Sure.
And dumpsters.
I would say this
Okay,
seems to
just
me
curious.
a lot more compatible with the neighborhood than a bank. Which is what's been there. So it's certainly more compatible than that.
And you've got grocery shopping, you've got an elementary school, you've got, you know, potentially if UTA can ever start running buses again, you know, UTA going up and down Bengal Boulevard, for a lot of other reasons of places in the city that, I mean, when we talk about high density, you could chop into two and it's 2 units. We're going, if the difference between 2 units and 6 units is the whole neighborhood's gonna burn down, that's a hard argument for me to hear.
One of the differences between what we considered before and what would appear from just the drawn rendered is that all the traffic was going to end up coming out on Bengal Boulevard. Whereas this time, all the traffic, which could be as much as 12 cars, maybe more, all come out on the circle. And so it creates much more traffic on the circle. It wouldn't have made as big an impact had you had that increase of traffic on Bengal Boulevard. And I think that's a difference that may concern the neighbors. Yes, all that traffic coming out on their quiet circle now.
That could be something you asked the applicant about. I would just say again, the development hasn't been formalized for this property yet.
No, I understand that,
Yeah.
but to me, it speaks to the issue of the density of what's on that property and of course how it's designed, but we're not talking about that now and we haven't gotten anything formally preserved or given to us. But if we're looking at high density versus moderate, I'm not following the argument as for restrictions. I guess I'm just not familiar enough with the 2 zones and the restrictions and how that would draw up just in a general case of how you would plan that to put a moderate density, because that's really what's around it. If you look at the development behind, there are several duplexes. There's 2 duplexes on the corner, and then there's the whole street of duplexes just southwest of the Smith's property.
On Chadbourne,
And those are all RM28 or R28s. And this would be the only one that isn't. And the R28 zone, just from what I'm reading, you'd get less. You'd get less on the property because it's moderate density. I mean, I understand that you'd like really high density, but it's, in my view, that's incompatible with the neighborhood. You've got to go clear down to about 2600 East to get a similar zone. And you look at that property and it's almost 3 acres. This is less than half an acre. And so to get the open space and all that for either one of them is going to be difficult. Like, it would be interesting if you took that mock-up that we're not talking about, that he presented to us, and tried to figure out how it was going in both of those. It'd be interesting to see the difference of the 2 and how it actually works out when push comes to shove.
I would say that this property does meet the RM standards as far as like lot size goes. Again, I can't speak to any.
No, I understand. I
development,
mean, it could go either way. I'm just looking at the intent of the zone, and the intent of one is stated in the zone, the way it's described, is high density and one's moderate.
Yeah.
And high density to me just communicates you're going to try and put more units on that spot. I mean, why else would it be called high density?
Yeah.
If it's not a concern and moderate and the high density are the same, then why don't we make it an R28 zone and match everything around it? I mean, it makes more sense to me.
One of the thoughts that I have to that as I analyze this is we're looking at a density, a much higher density in neighborhood commercial, the way it stands right now. It does, so that density, which is adjacent to across the street and what it is currently zoned at. As you analyze that, you know, if you were to get 30 studio apartments, so if this developer sold to a developer that was a studio apartment developer, he could go in and he could have an administrative approval in that space to develop, if I remember correctly.
They can figure it out.
If
Have
they
that
could figure it out.
conditional use permit still.
So, okay, so you have the conditional use permit within that, but we cannot deny that if I recall.
There's, based on state code, you know,
Yeah,
conditional use
there's-
permit shall be
there's
approved
safety
unless.
and-
Okay, I got it, yeah.
So if we're now looking at 30 units versus 6 units, if we were to go to R28, he'd only be able to get 2 units on that site today. And I think that 2 units on that site, you know, it would share, but that 2 units, I think, would create some issues. Just it would sit vacant for a long time at the end of the day, which we don't have any control over. But we have a 15-foot minimum requirement each side, 20-foot for corner, and then that is going to be on R28, 25-foot setback and 10-foot minimum on the corner with 30-foot side and 30-foot rear. So you're getting a much better use out of this. And it's that happy medium compared to what is across the street and what is currently there. So my thought process on this is it's kind of the best of both worlds. We're just not having to deal with some of the implications of neighborhood commercial. That's, you know, it's constringent. There's a lot of issues with it.
I think just for the counter thought is that it was proposed that we have 2 units or 10 units on that not all that long ago. And with all the discussions we went through, 10 didn't fly, 8 probably could have. But the idea that putting 30 studio on there, I'm not sure how that would work. I mean,
They
literally.
could, I mean, they could, it doesn't mean that
Well,
they
he could,
would.
but he could have
Right.
put 10 units on it. But when push came to shove, with the kind of parking that they needed for handicap and on and on, I won't go into it. 8 looked like the magic number. 30's just, I have no idea how you could do that and get it approved. I think that's just throwing a number out there just for a scare factor. Quite honestly, I don't think that's really feasible in the real world. On that piece of property, it's less than half an acre. Even though it may come under the zone that you could do that theoretically, actually, interesting to see how that worked.
So I think going back to the original 10 units, I believe with certain requirements under the intent of neighborhood commercial zoning prior to the moratorium, those requirements, if they were met based on commercial designation of neighborhood commercial, I think it would have been very possible. If he kept his application in, my guess is he would have been approved on that within 2 to 3 meetings with commercial components on the bottom. And that was the major reasons. You know, all that other stuff was really just the architectural changes that had to kind of go back and forth. And architecturally, you know, I think that they met all of the lot coverage ratios. I think they met all the parking requirements. I think it really came down to the intent of neighborhood commercial was there had to be a certain amount of commercial component, and the neighborhood commercial basically allocated that you had, you know, you had to have that. And he put like 150 square foot commercial unit on the bottom, which didn't meet the use at the end of the day. Now we have a use code for that. So once again, if he kept that application in, I think that project probably would have been approved. And I don't think we would have had any way that we could have done anything further to have withheld that project through. And if you recall, the definition was my issue on that project because they were trying to push a multifamily project through with the definition of neighborhood commercial. And there was no intent. I mean, there may have been intent, but there was no realistic way for them to have a commercial space out of that bottom to meet the neighborhood commercial. This being multifamily or R2, let's just use R28 as an example. The actual density that goes into place, it can be much higher. So 30 units, you know, there's a 30 unit building on much less square footage in adjacent cities. Now parking ratios and all that, that's a completely different situation. But if he were to keep it the way that it stands right now, he could hire an architect and he could figure it out. Do the economics work? Maybe not, but he could probably figure it out.
You've got, I
And
mean,
that's-
really, Sean, like, the parking becomes a huge issue for 30 units. You're gonna have to go subterranean substantially to get that many spots, and if he's gonna expend that kind of money. But I mean, we've changed the parking is a little different than it was with even the project that he did on Fort Union on a much bigger lot. So I do think that we're not doing tandem parking anymore. So I do think that, I mean, there will be some other limiters, and without seeing a project, it's really hard to talk in these kind of hypotheticals, 6 versus 30. I mean, just has a lot of cars to take care of, and we do have some requirements per unit in order to accommodate that many vehicles.
But he could go subterranean.
He totally could.
Currently.
Shared parking, so an option.
So,
Yeah,
I mean, I think here's the way I look at it. First of all, the applicant has applied for what he's applied for.
Sure.
And it's not R28.
No,
What he's applied for is a less intense application than what he has today. I have a little different opinion than Sean, but I think we were really obligated to approve his previous application. And so if we, I think eventually we would have gotten to the end, and that's what would have been the outcomes. We would have approved it. But this is less intense than what he currently has in terms of land use. Now, you could argue that when you've got someone on the ropes, you should go to the least intense possibility that exists. But I don't know why that would be the case. This is a less intense application than what he currently has the right to do. It's less intense than him putting any kind of commercial structure on it, whether it's 10 or 8 or whatever it might be. There's little question that he could have had at least this intensity in the zone he's in. So everything to me says this is an application that is less demanding on all of the resources of the city than what he currently has. Why would we not approve that?
Probably won't go too much further because we're almost at time. But I'll just say that as a reminder, zoning map amendments and general plan amendments are legislative actions, which means that your authority is to take public comment, discuss the merits of the proposal, which you've done a great job doing so far, and make recommendations to our city council to approve or deny. City council is the final approval authority on this type of project. There's more details in the staff report on that. As far as noticing goes, notices were posted, mailed, according to our code. There was a sign posted at the property. It was within 1,000 feet, so it took our staff a long time, but Maverick helped me out and we got it all done. We received 8 public comments as a result of that noticing by our deadline yesterday. Those were all forwarded to you. I didn't receive any comments via email after the deadline. I checked a couple different inboxes. We didn't see anything. I would assume some people are here tonight to speak on this item, but there's nothing additional we've received on our end to forward to you. Based on the findings in the staff report, we recommend approval for the project. Just a note, when you go to recommend approval or denial, 2 separate motions are required, one for the proposed land use map amendment and one for the rezone. Both of them have the same project reference number, but however you want to do that will be up to you. We can assist you with that if you need. And then I've got model motions for you, but that's essentially my presentation, and I'm happy to give it again in the next meeting.
Can I ask a quick question in terms of what the process is post it going to the city council? If we were to recommend approval and then it goes to city council and city council approves, then is it that the developer would come back with a proposal of a more confident proposal, or what would be the next steps?
It really depends on what they decide to propose. Do you have the RM zone?
There's a good chance, though, it doesn't come back before
Yeah,
us.
agree.
Yeah, that's what
Because it's administrative.
I don't think.
And
I was just gonna pull up the
Necessary
zones, just make
Maybe it would go to
sure.
architectural or something, but not back here. That's what I thought.
So, single family dwellings attached, which is kind of what the applicant has shown you in concept form, is a permitted use in the zone. So it would not come back to you for a conditional use permit. This property is not part of a subdivision. So even if they were trying to condominiumize those 6 properties into essentially what we would process as a subdivision, it doesn't meet the threshold for your review per our city code. So it's less than 10 units or 10 lots. So it's very likely it would not come back to you. So it's up to you
Just
to
curious. I
consider
just,
this today.
and especially for people maybe new to the process, understanding what next steps are is, well, yeah, just information. Okay, we are at 6 o'clock, so.
Commissioner Smith, if you can still hear us, I'm sorry you were unable to contribute to the conversation, but we hope to hear from you in the business session. Sorry,
Yeah.
apologies.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Okay.
He said, "Great, thank you." No, can't hear you yet. Okay, we
All right.
just need to take care of one more piece of business.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
see